Vision settings. Let's talk about it.
What's happening, guys? Joey here. Today we're going to talk about Dolby Vision settings for LG OLED TVs. Let's talk about it. Today we're going to talk about Dolby Vision settings for the LG B7, C7, and all the 7 series OLEDs from 2017. Let's get to it. Okay, I want to throw out 2 disclaimers before we jump into the settings. The first one is I have actually calibrated my TV because I use it as a monitor. I use it for production purposes. So my TV is color accurate, but what you see on your end may not look accurate because I don't know what display you're watching this on. The second disclaimer is these are the settings that I use that I like. So I calibrated the TV and then I tweaked it to my liking after that. So I think this is just a starting point. If you don't like these settings, that's perfectly okay. I just want to give you guys, well, a starting point, and then you can kind of tweak and adjust from there. All right, let's get to it. To change your Dolby Vision settings, you have to be watching a Dolby Vision movie or show. So we're going to head over into Netflix, open up Stranger Things Season 2, and that will trigger Dolby Vision so that we can change the settings. For this video, we're going to look at my cinema user settings under the Dolby Vision picture mode. That is the profile that I use most of the time, if not all of the time. So these settings will apply to all of the other modes except game mode, and we'll cover that towards the end. For Dolby Vision, the OLED light can absolutely be at 100 because how often are you watching Dolby Vision content? I do not see a high risk here for Dolby Vision settings. Now, for your regular HDR settings, your everyday settings, I probably wouldn't leave it at 100 all the time because I'm not sure what content you watch. For me, I'm very careful with my TV, so I do leave it at 100 and I've had no issues. But for Dolby Vision content, perfectly fine, leave it at 100 because most people are not watching Dolby Vision content all day long. So 100, peg it to the max, get all your brightness, enjoy it. Okay, contrast. This is actually what makes your TV brighter or dimmer. It is the luminosity setting, so to speak. I personally like it at 100, but if you push contrast above, I think 95-ish, you are definitely clipping highlight detail. And in my own testing, I have seen that my highlights are not as smooth and they don't roll off as nicely when I go above 95. However, I'm losing brightness when I try to preserve my highlights. So I just said, screw it, leave it at 100. I'll take the brightness over preserving highlight detail. If you're trying to preserve every little detail in your image, you might want to pull your contrast back, I don't know, 95 to 98. But me, I want all the brightness I can get out of this TV. I leave it at 100 and I'm perfectly fine with losing highlight detail. All right, moving on. Brightness is a very confusing setting because it does not actually control the brightness of your TV. If you find that your shadows or your black levels are crushed, you can increase the brightness by 1 or 2 notches and it may bring your shadow detail back. But keep in mind, it could make your image look a little bit washed out. On the flip side, if you find that your image is washed out and your blacks aren't dark enough, you can reduce the brightness by 1 or 2 notches and it will make your darks or blacks, well, darker. And that might give it that inky deep pop that you're looking for. But be careful with this setting. I typically leave it at 50. I think once or twice I might have moved it down to 49. Moving on. Okay, sharpness is a tricky setting. It can make or break your TV in a hurry. I use sharpness differently for different picture profiles based on the content that I'm watching. So I have a picture profile for sports, I have a profile for movies, I have a daytime setting and a nighttime setting. A thing to keep in mind for sharpness, before I just say, oh, my setting is 10. My setting is 10 for movies, but for sports, I have it set between 25 and 30 because typically when I'm watching sports, it's a lower bitrate content, and that means that it's going to be a little softer, there's macro blocking artifacts, and sometimes it's hard to read the numbers on jerseys, sometimes it's hard to read the scores, depending on if you're streaming or watching low quality cable TV. I recommend playing around with sharpness. Don't just take my word for it on this one, but for movies, I like it at 10. For gaming, I like it at 30. Sports, I like it at 30. But 10 is a safe starting point. If you ever try to use your TV as a computer monitor, you want it at 0, and that applies to all TVs. You do not want sharpness above 0 because it will wreck your text on your screen if you're trying to use it as a computer monitor. I had to learn that one the hard way. So my recommendation is 0 sharpness if you're trying to use your TV as a monitor. I like 10 for movies. I like 20 to 30 for sports and gaming. Okay, moving on. The tint setting is grayed out for Dolby Vision content, so ignore that. Okay, let's head down to expert controls. Okay, dynamic contrast. This is a very important picture setting because this sucker can apply an S-curve to your entire image. I spent about 30 hours testing what dynamic contrast is actually doing across Dolby Vision, regular HDR, and SDR. I was hoping to arrive at a definitive recommendation based on conclusive data, but what I actually found out is this really comes down to personal preference. After an exhaustive amount of testing, I finally figured out where I personally like the dynamic contrast settings. If I'm watching TV shows or sitcoms, for example, I like it set to off or low. If I'm watching movies or content that is by design very contrasty, I like it set to high. If I'm watching sports, I like it set to high as well, and gaming, I also like it set to high. Super resolution is supposed to help make blurry images more clear. I don't run into blurry content that often, so I've yet to be able to take advantage of this feature. You can leave it on or off, totally up to you. Edge enhancer. This is supposed to make edges a little more natural. I've yet to see it do anything in my testing on the content that I watch. But yeah, on or off, totally up to you. Color filter. All this does is it allows you to isolate red, green, or blue so that you can fine tune it to your liking. I don't use this, but you can if you like. White balance. This is where your color temperature lives. I recommend medium for TV, gaming, and sports, and I recommend warm 1 for movies. Head over to picture options, noise reduction, and MPEG noise reduction. I leave both of those set to auto. Motion eye care is supposed to prevent glare by reducing the brightness of your video based on movement and motion in your content. I don't use it, I leave it set to off, but if you're having eye strain or eye problems, then maybe turn this on and see if it helps. True motion. This is where your motion settings are. Off completely disables true motion. Smooth will soften anything that's fast-paced moving across the screen. Clear will make it sharper, and it gives it kind of a soap opera effect. Okay, as for me, I personally use the user setting. I have de-judder set to 4 and de-blur set to 10. So the higher you move the de-judder slider, you will start seeing artifacts around fast-moving objects. So if you're watching sports or an action film and something is moving across the screen really fast, it will definitely have artifacts kind of like a halo surrounding it. It looks like a little crystal outline around the object that's moving across the screen. The de-blur setting is a little hard to tell what it's doing. I think the de-judder option is far more noticeable, as the closer you get to level 10 on de-judder, the more it looks like soap opera effect. Some people love it, some people hate it, but just keep in mind, de-judder is essentially the soap opera effect slider. So when you start moving beyond level 5 and 6, you're getting closer and closer to the soap opera effect. So let me explain why I have my de-judder at 4 and my de-blur at 10. De-judder at 4 and de-blur at 10 allows me to maintain the film look as close as possible, but it also makes it more clear and less stuttery or juddery. So this is the perfect balance that I found. If you find that this doesn't work for you, I recommend you drop it back to de-judder 3 and de-blur 3, and then again start moving the sliders up slowly until you find a setting that works for you. If you want the settings for this picture mode to be applied to every HDMI input and for streaming, hit the Apply to All Inputs button at the bottom of the menu and you won't have to do this over and over and over. It'll save you some time. Okay, a quick note about game mode. All the same settings apply except for one thing. I would probably lower the OLED light, I don't know, 70 to 85, and here's why. some games have HUDs or heads-up displays, and if you have the OLED light at 100, you're putting your display at a higher risk of getting burn-in if you play games with those HUDs for long periods of time. So just to be safe, I would probably lower the OLED light, and that's the recommendation I'm going to kind of throw out there as a blanket for everyone, because I don't know your gaming habits, I don't know how long your sessions are, so I don't want to say leave your OLED light at 100, even though I do, but I'm a little more safe and I don't have binge sessions with games that have heads-up displays that worry me. I game on my TV every day, no issues so far. I've done a 1-month test to date at OLED light 100, all max brightness across the board. I haven't had any issues, but I certainly have seen OLED displays with burn-in. So my recommendation for game mode, the one thing that's different is I would definitely set the OLED light down to about 85-ish. Okay, that's it. Thank you guys for watching. I'm sorry the video was so long. I wanted to be a little more thorough this time though. But yeah, if you still have questions, leave a comment below. Otherwise, my contact info is at the end of the video. If you want to be a part of our community, hit the subscribe button and that little bell icon so you'll get notified when we post new videos. My name's Joey. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video. This thing on? Whew, that's nice.